FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
Welcome to Surviving the Credit Crisis, where it's become my mission to help you survive, strive, and thrive with homebuyer education and with purpose and an empowered financial life. We have a great show today, and I'm really excited to have someone that I highly respect, Kerry Lutz. He's an attorney, author, and radio talk show host of Financial Survival Network. And I've appeared on his show many times, and we have a lot of the same interests in mind when it comes to homebuyer education. And today we're going to be talking about credit. Hi, Kerry. How are you doing today?
Hey, I am doing great. Karen, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Oh, I'm so excited to have you here today. I love speaking with you when we do your show together. And I wanted to talk about credit some more in depth because I don't believe that consumers realize the kind of options that they have available when it comes to situations where they find themselves in difficulty. So one of the first questions I wanted to ask you today is, let's say a person realizes that their credit is less than stellar. What can they do about their bad credit?
Well, it all depends on first you have to know what your goals are. For instance, if you're looking to buy a house and you have a certain score in mind that you need to get a good mortgage at the most favorable terms, like for instance a 680, and you're 20, 30 points below where you need to be, that's one thing. But let's just say you've got less than stellar credit, you ran into some trouble during the credit bust, which so many of you did, because let's face it was trying times and the economy just kind of vaporized on a moment's notice, and a lot of you were caught holding the bag, as it were. So it all depends. You need to know what your goals are. And if it's buying a home, then you got to figure out where your credit is at right now to figure out what you need to do about it. And
well, I think, too, with home buying, that consumers don't realize that there are add-ons to pricing for the different credit scores. And 20 points difference in a credit score can make a huge difference in add-ons to interest rate or loan fees, and can literally cost them thousands of dollars over the life of the loan. For
sure. And if they're fortunate enough to be able to get a mortgage at all, let's face it, a lot of times you won't be able to get a mortgage because your credit is too bad, too low, your score is too low, and there's steps. I mean, look, I spent my whole life looking at these credit reports even before there was any credit scoring, and looking at the items, what's on the credit report, and understanding how they got there is really what it's all about when it comes to raising your credit score. And we want to raise the credit score ethically and honestly within the rules that are there. And it can be done, but you have to understand how it got there. And a lot of times things wind up on the credit report that aren't 100% correct. What you have to understand is that the credit bureau has to justify everything that's on that report. It has to be fully verifiable, and that's the key. If they can't verify it, then it has to come off, and they have to verify it within strictly mandated timetables.
Right.
It used to be that the credit bureau was solely responsible for the verification of the data. Now it's actually the credit grantor or the reporting entity that is responsible for the verification, as well as the credit bureau. And that's led to a lot of fun situations. But assume that you owe the money and that it's been verified, then what do you do? And there's a lot of options that are available to you, and we can go in and go into some hypothetical situations if you'd like.
Okay, well, let's do that in just a minute. One of the things I wanted to say first, though, is I see so many times people sitting across my desk where they have some credit issues and they want to buy a home and they feel helpless. They just are numb because they don't know what to do. And one of the things that I go over in my book, Conquer Your Closing Insider Secrets for Today's Savvy Homebuyer, is just that, steps that they can take. And one of the most important things that they need to do is to take action. And I find sometimes that people feel like victims and they don't take the necessary actions that they can have available to them to get their situation fixed. And it takes a period of time. They can't do it in 30 days and expect to buy a house 30 days later. It may take 6 months, it may take a year. So what would you recommend the first step be for someone who wants to take action to improve their credit?
All right. The first thing you do is you go over to one of the free sites. Each bureau will give you a copy of your credit report for free. There's ways to get your credit score for free, but understand that the credit score they give you is not necessarily the credit score that a mortgage bank is going to receive to evaluate you for a potential mortgage. Okay, there are millions of different credit scores out there now. Experian has something called a Vantage score, which is not the score that a mortgage bank uses when evaluating you for a mortgage. They use what's called FICO, and there's different FICO scores out there as well. So understand, when you buy a credit score, it's not the credit score probably that the mortgage bank is going to use when processing your mortgage application. So get your free credit report. You can go to annualcreditreport.com, and then you fill out verification information proving that you are who you say you are, and you'll get your credit reports on the spot, or more likely than not, you'll mess up some identification thing like, did you ever live on this street, or how much are you paying for this car loan? And then they'll require you to call them up and verify that you are who you say you are. But you'll probably get at least one or two out of the three credit bureaus. And then you review the information that's on there. They're fairly easy to understand. And there's different types of negative information that can show up on your credit report, the worst of which would be a bankruptcy, a foreclosure. And then you've got other things like charge-offs for credit cards and different types of loans. And then you've got these are called derogatory information, derogatory items. And then you've got something that you can do something about relatively quickly. And these are collection accounts. And these are accounts that collection agencies might have been dunning you or pursuing you for payment. Mm-hmm. And I'll just recount a story I had recently. I was driving down to Florida and going through Washington, D.C., a city that I dislike for a number of reasons that I won't go into. And they had a speed cam there that totally unbeknownst to me. And hey, I'm a little bit of a lead foot. And evidently I got caught speeding without any human intervention, sent a ticket to my old address, didn't have a forwarding address. And I didn't even know that I had gotten a ticket, never got any notification of it. But I was reviewing my credit report and I saw I had a negative item from the District of Columbia, and lo and behold, I owed them $250 for 6 months. I never even knew about it. They never caught up with me at my new address in Florida. So I called them up and said, all right, I'll pay you, but I want it taken off my credit report. Well, they referred me to a specific location on the District of Columbia website, which said that if you paid the ticket, automatic policy of the District of Columbia was to wipe it off your credit report within 30 days anyway. But the point here is, most collection agencies, if you pay the entire amount of the debt or you negotiate a payment lump sum, will remove that negative item from your credit report within 72 hours if you need it removed quickly. So if you've just got a credit report where you've got a few collection agencies that have been dunning you for money, and you settle with them all at once, you've got the money to do it, presumably, you can get those negative items wiped off of your credit report within 72 hours, and your credit score will go up dramatically, because a negative item from a consumer credit collection agency could knock your score down anywhere from 20 to 80 points, depending upon the recency. Recency is a very important factor when you're dealing with consumer credit reports. Just like in life, time is the great healer. When you come to credit reports, time is the great healer. A judgment be on your credit report for 7 years. A bankruptcy will be on your credit report for 10 years. Same with a foreclosure. But it only affects your credit score most within the first 18 months. After 18 months, it starts affecting your credit score less and less, to the point where it's on the report, but it has no effect on it.
Right. Well, and I have to tell you a story about something that I ran into recently. You know, when reviewing mortgages and that kind of thing, and we're looking at someone who has had a bankruptcy, for example, when a home was included and the home went to foreclosure. Normally there's a waiting period on a conventional loan of like 4 years, and on some of the government loans, the waiting period is a little bit less. But what I got caught up in is their bankruptcy was about 4.5 years old, and I thought that we were going to be fine because it was past the waiting period. But what happened with this particular lender, they apparently were delayed in getting the foreclosure settled, and their foreclosure didn't happen until like 2 years after the bankruptcy. And they got caught up in that MERS scandal. Mm-hmm. And so they weren't able to actually foreclose on the people till like 2 years later. And they thought everything was handled 4 years ago, and now they have 2 more years to wait because of the delay in their foreclosure. And it was really sad.
Yeah, well, the MERS scandal and all that, definitely there's some unintended fallout, collateral damage from it, and they were obviously an example of that. And, you know, just that kind of stuff is going to happen there.
Right.
And what can you do?
I know. So one of the things I wanted to ask about, too, today is, let's say that somebody finds themselves behind in their mortgage and it looks like they're headed for foreclosure. You know, what should they do? Should they let a lender foreclose, or should they try to do a short sale?
Always go for the short sale, for the simple reason that whenever you fill out a mortgage application, one of the questions on there is, have you ever had a foreclosure? Mm-hmm. And in this day and age of digital records, online records, it's really simple to find out if you've ever had a foreclosure. In fact, it'll often pop up on your credit report in public records section. Credit report has a number of sections. One is public records, which will show judgments, liens, bankruptcies, foreclosures, repossessions of vehicles. And then you've got your credit card and mortgages and other types of lending relationships. And then you've got inquiries. It's got a whole bunch of different sections in it. Personal information, your social security number, addresses that you've lived in for the past however many years. I don't know how far it goes back. So, you know, you need to fill out your loan applications honestly, because failure to do so is a federal crime, and people have been prosecuted for that. So you always want to avoid a foreclosure if you possibly can, because it's going to be with you for the rest of your life. So a short sale is always preferable, because in a short sale, it's actually an offer and compromise, and that's recorded on your credit report as it could be recorded as a charge-off, which will be on there for a few years, or it could be recorded as offer and compromise, which is the same thing as basically a balance reduction. So, you know, it's just preferable to have a short sale. And obviously a short sale can't occur without your lender's agreement, right? Mm-hmm. And different lenders take different amounts of time. But basically now, this far into the credit crisis, most if not all lenders have procedures in place to bring about short sales relatively quickly.
Well, I know, too, the waiting period for short sales, as far as getting a new loan, is a lot shorter than a foreclosure as well. So that in itself is an advantage. One of the things I wanted to ask you, because I haven't heard, is I heard that well, it wasn't really a tax deduction, but the protection against the deficiency on a short sale was forgiven, and that expired the end of 2013. So now in 2014, if they didn't renew it, that if you had a deficiency on a short sale, that you could be taxed for that. Did you hear if that was renewed?
Did not hear about that. It's a risk you have to be willing to take. Odds are you still probably have a loss on the house in any event, because you probably paid more for it than you received in payment. For instance, if you paid $500,000 and you sold it for $400,000, you lost money on the sale, even if the mortgage, even if you wound up saving, say, $50,000 on the mortgage, you still had a loss on the house. So whatever gain you might have picked up on the charge off or the forgiveness on the mortgage, you still don't have a profit on the home. So it's something you need to talk to your accountant about, but you're still going to be better off because having that foreclosure on your credit report is going to be with you a lot longer than potential gain, the phantom gain on your forgiveness of indebtedness, as it's called by the IRS.
So, well, that's great news, Kerry. Let's talk a little bit more about bankruptcy. And I know that there's things to consider before filing bankruptcy. So do people have a choice, actually?
Yeah, well, here's the thing. Most of your creditors really don't want you to go bankrupt. For them, if they think you're committing fraud and you've got money that they could get and you go out of your way to really inflame them, then they might pursue you in bankruptcy. But for the most part, if you're Joe Sixpack, you have a job in, basically a factory or a warehouse or something like that, or an office, and you've been up front with them, they're not going to pursue you. But if you're going to have to file Chapter 13 and pay them back a portion of it anyway, you're better off negotiating with them or having your attorney, better yet, negotiate with them to write off a certain portion of the balance, and pretty much you'll wind up where you would have been anyway, but you won't have this bankruptcy on your credit report for 10 years. And again, every time you go to fill out a loan application for anything, the first question that's on there after the financial information is, have you ever filed for bankruptcy? And again, with online records, they can instantly know whether you've done it or not. Because if you filed any place in the country in the past 20 years, there's a record of it. I assure you of that. They will know that there was a filing. They're just going to know for sure.
Can we talk for a minute about the difference between Chapter 7 and Chapter 13? Because I don't think people understand that.
Sure. Well, a Chapter 7 is when a discharge is granted. Let's say you owe $100,000 and you've got $1,000 in assets. Basically, a discharge says all that debt has been discharged. You don't owe anything. Under a Chapter 13, it's called a wage earner plan. The court will say, the trustee, you will pay back a certain percentage of it, like say 10 or 15% over a period of several years. And the rest upon your successful repayment of that 10 or 15%, and I'm just pulling that number out of the air understand that, will be discharged. So, you have to pay back some of it. And that was the big change in the bankruptcy code 10, 12 years ago. The banks got that through, and it was done because basically the perception was that there was a lot of abuse going on. The stigma of bankruptcy had been diluted over the years, and it was felt that people were going bankrupt when they could well afford to pay back some of their debts. So Chapter 13 was emphasized, and really people were forced into Chapter 13. And to some extent it's worked, where people are forced into these wage earner plans, whereas in the past they would have been just gone straight to a Chapter 7, and that would have been it.
So what determines the difference of which you get?
Really, the court decides that. And still plenty of people go through Chapter 7s without a second thought. Depends what part of the country you're in. Depends if you have a reliable income. People working for, one person I knew of worked for a utility company, was making a 6-figure income, and really he had a second mortgage, didn't have any equity in his home, but basically would have been personally liable for the second mortgage. So effectively was forced into a Chapter 13, had to pay off about 15% of his credit card debt. That's the one case I'm thinking of. But still, there's plenty of abuse, and plenty of people file Chapter 7 and get away with it. So, but it was really the banks forced it through. And
well, I have mixed feelings about that too, being in the mortgage business my entire career. I mean, because I understand the purpose of having bankruptcy was for catastrophic events and stuff when people couldn't pay. But there's been so many times that I have seen it abused. I had a loan customer once that filed bankruptcy over $1,500 debt. And I asked them, I said, well, what transpired here? And they said, well, their dog went over to the neighbors and ate the neighbor's sheep. And the guy sued him for $1,500, and they didn't want to pay him, so they filed bankruptcy.
Yeah, there's definitely abuses in the system. There's people that go on shopping sprees right before they file for bankruptcy. There's a lot of abuse in it. Let's face it. I've seen it myself and successfully challenged people's bankruptcies. And there's an irresponsibility factor. People get these credit cards in their hands. On the other hand, the banks are responsible to a degree for flooding the system with this cheap credit that should have never occurred. And I'm not relieving the individual of your responsibility to act responsibly with your credit.
No, and I agree with that too. But also at the same time, there's a certain amount of financial literacy out there that we just don't see the way we used to. I mean, the kids go to college, and the second they get to school, they're bombarded with credit card companies. And so they're using credit cards to buy pizza and everything else. And then they get out of school with student loans and credit card debt, and they're kind of set up to fail right from the very beginning.
Yeah, exactly. It's financial literacy that's really lacking in this whole equation. And I always used to say Visa is your passport into debt. And, it's like the whole debt mentality of the United States, from the government to federal government, to state governments, local governments, to corporations, to the individual is really the problem here. And bankruptcy was just a way to ring up debt and then get out from underneath it. And, look, the U.S. is the land of the second chance, the second opportunity, but you can't abuse it either.
Right. No, I agree with that. But it's really become my mission to make sure that our young people and first-time home buyers and that kind of thing get the financial education that they need. I was talking to my daughter's counselor. She's going to be a senior next year, and we were going to be taking her electives for school next year, and one of them on the list was personal finance. And I said, well, Melissa, you should take personal finance because you can learn about all the stuff that I do and interest in how that works. And the counselor spoke up and said that the personal finance class had been dropped due to lack of interest. So, I mean, it blows my mind that it was an elective in the first place, and now it's been dropped because nobody wants to take it. So let's say you have a bunch of credit cards and you can't pay them back. What should you do?
You know, really the best thing is not go into denial about it, to call up your creditors, the credit card companies, explain the situation to them honestly, and work out a plan with them. Like I say, they don't want to really sue you because that's a loser for them. They recover very little from litigation. They do recover some, but not a lot. And, you know, they don't really want you to go bankrupt because they know that then the recoveries are going to be limited as well. They recover very little from people who actually go into bankruptcy. So they really do want to work with you. It's not like they're going to not push for the best bargain that they can get. And sometimes it's better to have an attorney do this for you. And, you know, you think, well, I can't afford an attorney, but the attorney will get the best deal for you. I've seen them settle for 15 cents on the dollar. I've seen them settle for 20 cents on the dollar. Depends upon the credit card company. If it's Amex, they usually push for a better bargain, but you want to get to them before they send it out to the law firm to sue you. Okay, you want to get to them in their internal recoveries, not when they send it out to a law firm, because the law firm is incentivized to collect as much as they possibly can. So don't go into denial is the key. Talk to them before it gets out of the building, so to speak. Well,
yeah, I totally agree with that because I've found, you know, in my own personal situation or whatever that, I mean, we all have a particular point in time where, you know, something comes up that we need to deal with. And I've always found in my career that being honest and being forthcoming and taking responsibility goes a huge ways.
Yeah.
So, Kerry, if people want to find out more about your radio show, the Financial Survival Network, how do they get a hold of you or how do they find you?
Sure. They can just go over to the website, financialsurvivalnetwork.com. They'll also see my book there. It's called Forget Wall Street, Go for the Gold and Silver Too. And, you know, we're doing the show constantly throughout the day. We're also on libertyexpressradio.com, streaming website, streaming radio station. We're on there from 6 to 8 p.m., Monday through Friday. Partners in that with Alan Butler. We've got hundreds of thousands of listeners every week. It's amazing.
So you talk about just anything financial?
We're talking about the financial system. It's kind of a libertarian-based radio site that you'll hear people that you can't even believe are around. But we're very focused on the individual and self-empowerment, and then how you make the system work for you rather than you working for the system.
Okay, cool. Well, I've been there, and I've really enjoyed some of the stuff that you have listed on your show page. So I think that's great insight for people. So we have just a couple of minutes before we have to wrap up. So if you had one final thought for people, what would that be?
Education, really. Learn what's on your credit report. Don't fear it, because once you know what's on there, it's very empowering, and you can come up with a plan to turn things around. Sometimes the plan can work in a matter of days and weeks. Other times it's a matter of months and years. So then you need to take the longer view, but just find out what's there. Don't go into denial and take responsibility. It's really that simple.
Well, you know, I agree with that because I have learned, and not only in my mortgage career, but in a variety of different other areas, that, you know, the biggest secret is just taking action. That's the determining factor between success and failure, is just taking action.
Great point.
Well, thank you so much, Kerry, for being with me today. As always, I want to thank my audience for joining me on Surviving the Credit Crisis. And I know in my heart that together we can all save our financial future one house at a time.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.